Hello, hello. Welcome everyone. I'll just wait a few seconds for people to join live. Give me a wave. Today we are talking about career change considerations. So we're talking about, this doesn't have to be that you're considering a complete change of career. It can be changes within your current career. So maybe you are looking at pivoting to a new niche or special interest. Maybe you're looking at pivoting to a new role within your profession. Maybe you are wanting to study something new within your profession, or maybe you are wanting to go to something completely different. Maybe that's a new degree path. Maybe that's just a new career path without a new whole set of studies. So yeah, it can be small shifts, it can be big shifts. We're talking about all of them today. So this can apply to all of that. And I'll just start a little bit with my story of changing. So I, as many of you will know, I am a chiropractor. So that's how I was trained. I was trained as a chiropractor, and I practiced for about 7 years in various different settings. So I had various different locum jobs at different practices. I owned my own practice for a while. I did a little bit of I'm trying to think of the word now. Anyway, work at Wallspine, volunteer work as a chiropractor, short stint doing that. And then I worked in the Netherlands for 3 years in quite a busy practice there. So I have experienced different scenarios within the chiropractic profession. And I generally knew from the beginning that I didn't necessarily feel like this is it. This is the thing that I want to be doing. I'm so excited by this. I'm so lit up by this. I generally found things within my profession that I was excited about, and I tended to pursue those things and go in those directions that did spark my curiosity. But I just generally didn't have the sense of like, this is really what I want to be doing. But I didn't have the sense of what I did want to be doing. So I was constantly considering other options. I was constantly researching other degrees. 1 week I wanted to switch to this, the next week I wanted to switch to this. So there wasn't like this clear, this is what I want to be doing. It was just a sense of like, I don't know if this is what I do want to be doing. But yes, I did find aspects of my profession that I did really enjoy. And I'll go into this a little bit more, but I just want to say, when it comes to my story or any other clinician story, it's not about the specific profession. So this is not a comment on the chiropractic profession whatsoever. I've seen people pivot in so many different directions. It really is like a personal thing. So I just want to make sure that you know that. But yeah, so the main frustration that I had, I think, was wanting to help my patients at a deeper level and feeling like I couldn't really do that in practice. But also when I started to explore things, I realized that if I looked at the things that I naturally wanted to learn about, the things that I would read about without it being useful in some sense, or it wasn't related to it, but I just naturally wanted to learn so much about that, it wasn't the stuff that was specific to chiropractic. So that's just something I realized, like my natural strengths and interests didn't really match with chiropractic in some sense. But one of the things that I really found helpful when I was considering a change, and this is something that we'll talk about as well, I just have some notes of some of the things I'd like to talk about, but I mentally designed the version of my current profession that would really light me up, that would get me so excited. And I would really recommend that to anyone who is considering, whether that's you're considering a different job or considering a different role or considering an entirely different career, think about what is the most incredible option that I can envision of where I am currently. Because often we are comparing our dream version of whatever we think is next to this version that we have currently that we don't necessarily think matches us or suits us or that we're particularly happy in or fulfilled in. And we want to be comparing at the same level. So we kind of design the dream version of where we currently are. If everything had to go amazingly, or you had to design a practice that maybe didn't even look like the typical practice in your profession, but it was completely what you thought people needed, or what was aligned with your strengths and your interests, and you compare that with the new option. And when I did that, I still decided that I wanted to pursue my coaching practice. It still is what lit me up more, but it was so cool doing that exercise, because it actually made me fall back in love a little bit with my own profession, because I had to imagine what would be amazing about it, and that was a really cool exercise to do. So it's just part of this kind of theme that will come up a lot today, where we're not running away from the things that we don't like. Hi, Jimmy. We're not moving away from that, we're moving towards what we do want. So we're thinking, what do I really want? What is going to light me up? Rather than I'm trying to get away from this. So I've just jotted down a few steps, but I just want to really make sure that you know these are very individualized. So this is something that I work with my clients on, is deciding on and taking the next step in their career journey. So this is what I do in one-on-one coaching, which means it's very tailored to your specific situation, what your strengths are, what your interests are, what your struggles are, what your life situation is. So when I go through some of these steps, just kind of apply that in your own mind and just think, this doesn't necessarily have to apply to you. Don't use this information against yourself, where you kind of I say something and then you take that on of I have to do that as well, right? If it doesn't apply to you, if it's not useful, you leave it. You take what's helpful and leave what's not. So generally, I'd love to know from you, if you're willing to share any kind of feedback, anything that you're considering in terms of your career, if it's a big change or a small change, I'd love to know. But most of us, when we're considering a change, it's because of some kind of discomfort. Sorry, I keep kicking this thing. It's some kind of discomfort. Maybe we're feeling unfulfilled. Maybe we're feeling like I was feeling, where I don't even know if this is the right fit. This just doesn't feel like what lights me up or what gets me excited. Maybe it's something like being burnt out, or what they call bored out, right? When you just don't feel very stimulated by the work that you're doing. Maybe you just have a toxic work environment. Maybe you don't like your boss. Maybe you don't like your colleagues. Maybe you don't like the particular details of the practice that you're working in, right? It can be for different reasons that we're wanting a change, but often it starts with some kind of discomfort, some kind of signal I don't know if this is where I need to be. And so what I just want to encourage you to do, this is often the first step, is just starting where you are. Now, this is a caveat. If you are really burnt out, if your health is suffering, if you are in a very toxic environment where your mental health is at risk, all of those things might be a bit more urgent, or are more urgent, right? So you may need to get out immediately. You don't have time to stay and think about things and design different options. You just need to take care of yourself. So I just want to give that caveat. This is not always applicable, but if you can, try and see if you can start where you are. So almost like settling in to where you are. And the reason is because we don't want to do this again from this is what I'm trying to get away from. I just want to ease this discomfort. We want to be very intentional about the choices that we make. So where we are, we want to start gathering data. What exactly is it about my current situation that I'm not happy about, or that I don't feel is fulfilling? What exactly are those ingredients, right? Because often we just have this vague sense of it, and then we try and move on to the next thing without really having considered what those ingredients are. So we're gathering data about that. You're focusing on what you can control. So when you list out all of the things that you perceive are making you unhappy where you are, or unfulfilled or burnt out, list all of the reasons. Get as many as you can on paper. And then separate those things into, this is what I have complete control over. This is what I have some control over, and this is what I have absolutely no control over. And the things that we have absolute control over, or some control, that's where we want to be focusing our attention, because those are more kind of personal factors, or they're skills that if we had to develop them, they would serve us in the next phase anyway, right? If I struggle with boundary setting, instead of just moving to a practice where I perceive I don't have to set boundaries as much, what if I learned how to set boundaries, right? And even if I still ended up switching, it would be something that I would take with me. Almost think of the obstacles that you're facing as being the thing that is going to be your growth edge, the thing that is prompting you to grow in a particular direction. And then also notice if all of the things that you mention are outside of your control, right? This is just something that I tend to notice is like a clinician will tell me all of the reasons that they're unhappy, but they're all other external things, right? They're all what other people are doing. And it makes total sense. There are, of course, external factors that are driving our unhappiness or that we're unfulfilled and all of that. I'm not denying that, but just it's something to notice when every single reason is someone else, right? Or the system or whatever it is, right? And nothing that is based on you, right? So we just want to notice that. Sometimes clinicians go to the other extreme where everything is them, right? And they are kind of taking just sort of like in some sense abusive behavior, or just like they're just letting themselves be taken advantage of, and just working more hours and not demanding that they get paid for those hours or whatever it is. Like obviously there's nuance to that, but it can sometimes go in the opposite extreme where the clinician thinks it's only their stuff, right? So generally we have kind of a mix of both, but either way we're going to be focusing on the things that we can control. So when we're doing that, we're not necessarily denying that there's external things. It's just that we can't control those things. So we're focusing on the areas that we can control. We're gathering data. We're discovering exactly what it is that is making us unhappy where we are. And then you can do exercises kind of like those, that design exercise that I mentioned earlier, where you're designing the most ideal version of your current situation. And sometimes we end up seeing that we can actually create that. Or you can ask yourself, how could I? If this was possible, how would I have created it? So those are just things that you can look at for your current situation. And mainly what I want to just encourage you to think about here is there is no profession, there's no role or job or anything like that that doesn't have difficulties, that doesn't have things that are going to be challenges and obstacles to it. So when we're solving for a career change or a change within our career, we're not looking for where are there going to be no obstacles, where is it not going to be hard, where is it going to be easy, right? We're not looking for where is it never going to be uncomfortable. It's that idea of choosing your hard. Like, what difficulty am I willing to take, right? When I made a switch from working as a full-time employee to doing my own thing, there are of course risks to that. There are of course challenges to that. But those were challenges that I was willing to take on for pursuing what I wanted to pursue. All right, so we're just choosing which difficulties we want. Sometimes that's choosing which difficulties feel like this is my growth edge. This is where I need to be leaning in, right? You can kind of have the sense of, do I need to grow in the direction of actually sticking with something even when it's hard and working through the discomfort and working through those skills, developing myself? Or is my growth edge actually being willing to pivot and do something different and go my own way, even when people might be disappointed or people might judge you or reject you or whatever the case is? So you're kind of finding, where's my growth edge here? So the next part, the first kind of part of the process is just starting where you are, which is often what we do not want to do. But if you can, and like I said, your situation is not urgent to get out of like right now, see if you can settle in, see if you can gather data where you are and start exactly at that place. The second is getting existential. So when I say getting existential, I just mean we're kind of stepping back a little bit and we're looking at the bigger picture and we're saying, like, what do I actually want? Sometimes we just kind of think of what is the next logical step, or what is the thing that uses my degree, or what is the thing that's kind of adjacent to what I was doing, right, that I already have experience for. It's almost like you're on a train and you're just trying to decide which stop to get off, versus going, do I even want to be on this train in the first place? Right? So sometimes we need to just take a step back, look at, if I could do anything, what would I want to do? Right? We're designing different prototypes. This is in my Facebook group. I also have a video called Design Your Career, which takes you through certain exercises. But think of designing different ways that your life could go, right? Or your career could go. They talk about, this is, trying to remember the name, but anyway, they use the design exercise that we started with at the beginning, where you design exactly where you are, but what is the most incredible version of that? you design a version of what they call your plan B. So if your profession disappeared tomorrow, what would you do? What is your like immediate plan B? And then what is your wild card? What is like, if I wasn't scared, if I didn't fear people's judgments, if I wasn't worried about how much I was going to be earning, what would I do? What is that like wild card? And sometimes we can just learn from these different ideas that we've designed, and we can infuse those ideas into where we currently are. Sometimes that prompts us to make a change. Sometimes we combine all of those things. Sometimes we do it successively. So you can use those ideas, but it's just to start designing things that you maybe just didn't consider before. And this is a similar idea where people think that they're going to be wasting their degree if they don't do something that is using that degree. And often what that leads to is you just kind of finding something that uses your degree, but that you don't actually like. And then a few years down the line, you looking for something different again, right? So just know that those are the kinds of thoughts and beliefs that you can start to question. Like, is it true that it's wasting my degree if I don't use it in my next step, right? So not just kind of going to what is the next logical step, what is the next kind of stop on this train, right? Taking a step back and seeing, do I actually even want to be on this train, or do I want to be in a completely different train, right? So that is the step of getting existential. And then the last one is just making the decision right. So another way you can think about this is just living into your decision. So what often happens is we make a decision, and then we're constantly worrying about, was that the right decision, was that the wrong decision, and we end up not being present in our current situation. And not only that, but the chances of the new situation working out, the chance of that happening are going to be much higher if you are fully engaged, fully committed to the step. And fully committed doesn't mean that you never change your mind later on, right? You can always change your mind. You're an adult, you can do what you want, right? It just means that when you are in that you are fully in that. You have both feet in it. You're not having one foot out the door and like constantly keeping your options open and like considering other options the whole time, especially if this scenario like starts to look like, oh, it's not maybe working out, and you're constantly looking at other options, or every time you come up against an obstacle or a discomfort in your current or in the new role that you like looking somewhere else. You are making the decision. You've gone through the intentional process of looking at different options. You've made a decision that feels right for you. It feels most aligned to you, and then you go and you live that decision, and you fully commit to it, and you fully are present in that decision. And then you gather data, and then you can make the next decision, right? Sometimes we try to do what they call like innovating in thought, where we just think, if we can just think about it enough, we will solve for everything. We'll pick the perfect option. We'll never have any regrets later. We'll never need to pivot again later. And we can just think about it enough, right? But often the only way that we get to know stuff is through experience. Think about your own degree, right? If you are considering a change, you probably didn't know the realities of your current profession until you started working in it. And not only the realities of the profession, but knowing whether it matches you or not. Knowing what is it about this that doesn't feel fulfilling for you or doesn't feel enjoyable to you. Those things were only things you could gather from actually doing it. And that's another reason why it's never wasted, right? It gives you clarity. And that was the only way that you could have gotten that, right? It can't happen in thought. So it's just making that decision and being fully present in it, fully committing to it, and making the decision right, essentially. So it's kind of the opposite of, I want to make the right decision and I'm going to kind of obsess over this and figure all the details out and write a whole list of pros and cons that I'm adding to for months and months and months, and they keep kind of balancing each other out. We're making a decision, and then we're making the decision right. Instead of making the right decision, we're making the decision right. So we're choosing something, we're making that decision right, and that is actually where it's going to have the highest chance of actually working out. If we're constantly having one foot out the door, the chances of it working out are pretty low. And then we'll be like, you see, I knew it wasn't working out. Okay, so all of that, the reason why we're doing that whole process is just so that we make a really intentional decision. So one of the biggest things is that we don't want to regret what we did, right? And regret is also just a choice of how we frame something, right? But when we know that we looked at different options, we made the decision very intentionally, and then we went forward with the decision in order to gather more data, the chances are very low that we're going to look back on that and regret it. We know what the decision-making process was. We know what our thoughts were about it. We know what we were thinking and believing about this change. And so we know that if at a later point we do want to make another decision, we know that it's just because we gathered new data, we got new information, and we wanted something different. It's not because we made a bad decision or a wrong decision. So it's just living intentionally, right? Which is what often so many of us are craving. Like, I just want to know that I'm living intentionally. And this is part of the process that helps us feel like we are living intentionally. So again, we're not running away from discomfort, we're going towards what we want. One of my coaches used to put this as, you don't want to be running away from a bear, you want to be running towards your lover. And that was kind of how she framed when I was struggling with whether or not I should change careers. There were certain things that I was worried about. Like, I remember one of the things was fear of disappointing people and fear of people thinking that I was unreliable because I just kind of like changed things, right? And we looked at those kind of character judgments but yeah, she was just saying, like, we want to be going towards what we really want, not trying to be running away from the discomfort. And one of the reasons also that she framed that in was previously, this is a little bit earlier on, but one of the things that bothered me was that chiropractic wasn't as respected, like as I perceived other professions were. And so this was one of the things that would kind of bother me. And when people would do something that seemed disrespectful or weren't like acknowledging me or like weren't valuing my profession, that's when I would start to like research other options. So she saw that kind of like trigger and that relationship between this would happen, and then I would look at other options. So it was a very clear, like, I'm trying to get away from that discomfort. So all of those things, you want to be looking at your reasons why, and you want to love your reasons why you're making a change, right? You really want to be clear on your reasons and love your reasons why. And this is the story that you're going to be telling about this transition, right? You want to love that story as well. And part of this is also that we're taking responsibility for creating a healthy, fulfilling career. And again, this is not because there aren't external factors, right? There are huge problems in the healthcare system. There are so many issues with like how people perceive certain professions, how people are treated if you have a certain profession, right? There are genuine external factors, but we want to almost like take that. I sometimes talk about radical responsibility, where we are saying, I am responsible for creating my healthiest and most fulfilling career. Yes, there are external factors, but there are factors that I cannot control. And if I was to influence those factors, if I was to contribute to systems change, it's going to come from me being lit up by what I do, from me being energized, from me being taken care of, from me wanting to do those things. That is actually going to give me the best chance of creating change in the system. It's not going to come from me just sitting back, being complacent and being like, well, it's all the external, that's why I'm not happy and that's why I'm not fulfilled, right? That it just is very disempowering because we can't do anything from that space. It might actually be totally true, but it just gives you very little ability to act, right? So it's almost like we're taking the mindset of something that is helpful for us, something that's going to help us move forward and actually make a change, make a difference in our own life and other people's lives, not necessarily just the truth of what is happening in the external world, right? Like, what is going to be helpful for me? So all of these are factors that we can consider in our career change. Like I said, in your particular situation, there might be different things that you need. This is part of what I'm always working on with my one-on-one clients. Like I said, that deciding on and taking the next step in your career journey. And that can be anything. That can be those small changes, that can be those tiny pivots, or it can be big, massive changes to a completely different career, completely not even an adjacent profession, like a completely different profession. I remember one of the things that I that stood out to me. There was this interview with Brene Brown, and she said something along the lines of like she finds it a real pity that people who are good at like science and maths don't know that they can be artists. It was some idea of like, you know, generally when you are academically very strong, you're sort of like pushed in a certain direction. And it's just, that's that whole like getting existential, right? Just taking a step back and considering like, I can be anything. I can be an artist if I want to. I don't have to be in a helping profession or typical helping profession. I still think art is helping people. But in this sort of typical thing that we think, right? We often think of just the adjacent things or things that seem like the logical next step. But just, you know, consider different options for yourself. And sometimes that's helpful to have someone prototyping these things with you, designing different options, letting you see possibilities that maybe you didn't even consider for yourself, which is really exciting. So if this is something that you are wanting to work on, if you are considering a change, I would love to talk about working together. So we kind of work on those two layers, right? There's the career aspect to it, looking at what is that next step in your career journey and how can we decide on that step and take it. And often that also comes with things like personality assessments, strengths assessments, getting clear on your vision in the sense of like what kind of world do you want to be contributing to, what kind of lifestyle are you wanting to create for yourself, what do you see as like your ideal day or your average day in your life, what do you want that to look like, what do you want that to feel like. So we're using all this information, not only the data from like where you are and looking at different thought patterns, different emotional patterns, what is contributing to you being unhappy where you are, and then through that decision-making process we're using other data to help us decide what is that next step, and then we're living into that next step. I'm helping you really be present in that next step and make that decision right. And then the second layer, so there's the career journey, and then the second layer is our deep health. So deep health just meaning health in every aspect, your mental health, your emotional health, your physical health, your existential health, right? Your sense of purpose and your bigger picture of the world, your environmental health, what's around you, your relationships. So we're making sure that you are deeply healthy while pursuing the career that you really, really want. The career that's going to light you up without falling into things like burnout. I think we often see our career and our health as kind of opposing factors that we have to kind of find balance in, but I really believe that they can be superpowers for each other. Being deeply healthy is really a superpower for the most incredible career, and having a career that feels purposeful, that feels fulfilling to you, that is part of your deep health, that plays such a huge role in our health and resilience in all dimensions of our life. So they really are, they work together instead of in opposition with each other. So if you're interested in working with me, what you can do is just send me a direct message here on Instagram and let me know 3 days and time combinations that work for you in the upcoming week. So you don't have to worry about when my schedule is. I will make myself available for one of those times. You just give me 3 options. We set up an hour Zoom call where I take you through an exercise. So it's a process that helps you identify what are the areas that you really are wanting assistance on and what you want those areas to look like. So I have a process that helps us do it. You don't have to know going into it what you want to achieve with coaching. The exercise helps us identify those things. So we do that process together, and then we'll also talk about what coaching together would look like, how that works, logistics, pricing, etc. We'll talk about all of that on the call to help you make a decision that is best for you. So I'd love to connect with you. Send me a DM and we'll talk about setting up that call. And just in general, I wish you so much luck with your career journey, whether that's maybe making a small pivot in the next while or making a huge pivot. I find it so exciting when clinicians are doing, whether that's pivots or just creating something that is so aligned to who they are. It's just incredible to watch and be a part of. So I'm so excited for that. And please let me know anything in this live that really resonated with you, something that you're going to be taking and applying to your consideration for a career change. Awesome. Have a wonderful evening and I'll chat to you guys soon.